welcome to With You Podcast.
Where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
And we're coming to you for a fun podcast today, kind of falling in the play section of this season.
Yeah, we needed something light, so we're going to be doing another movie review.
I hope you like movie reviews.
We do one a season or so, I think.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fun way to just give us something fun to do to watch a movie and then talk about it.
Yeah, and see if it involves any of the things we are thinking about. And this is play and family and fun.
Yeah, so this one is The Wild Robot. That's a new movie.
Which I hadn't heard of until
I hadn't either.
one of our
I don't
kids
think
brought
we
one
really ever know what's out anymore. in
No,
the
we
theaters.
only watch what's on planes.
That's true. And yeah, we've watched a lot of movies on planes lately, and they're usually from the 1980s.
Yeah. And it gets a little bit, it's sad to say, but we kind of run out of movies to watch. We're sitting next to each other. It's like, what are you going to watch? I don't know. I think I'll watch Space Jam for the 10th time.
Yeah, some airlines have a better list than others. I ran out pretty early this last flight.
I know. Did you see anything interesting? I can't even remember.
Once I see them on a plane, they're instantly out of my memory.
Yeah.
As soon as they're done.
Yeah. I think we probably doze in between.
I did watch Despicable Me 4. What is it with me in animated movies lately?
I don't know.
It was when I literally just ran out. And we have to, when we come back this direction, we try to stay awake. Going to Europe, we sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to talk about any of those movies.
No.
This is one that's
No more
in
about
the
that.
theaters.
Yeah.
It was fun to watch, and it's, like you said, The Wild Robot.
Yeah. And our daughter recommended it because she watched it with friends and said she thought we'd enjoy the themes. It was beautiful screen
Yeah.
play.
The animation was remarkable.
Yeah.
That was part of the favorite part for me.
I think that's what she enjoyed about it.
Yeah, it was just beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautifully
So
done.
if you want to get lost in beautiful cartoon, Wild Robot.
Yeah, so we're going to chat about it. And so we would recommend when we do a movie review to go see the movie first and then listen. But, because we'll probably spoil things.
Yeah.
You'll learn something about the movie that might be a spoiler.
Do we want to tell them to pause and go like,
No.
please come back and listen to us? But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be more interesting if you've seen the movie, but it might be fun to listen and then go see it, or just listen, because it's really just about a story.
It is.
And everything that we bring out of a movie is relevant whether or not you've seen the movie.
Well, and I
hopefully.
was realizing as we kind of talked about this, we both see it through our own lenses.
Yeah.
That the same movie was like different things popped for me than what popped for you.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating because I'm like, how did you not see this? And you're like, how did you not see that?
Yeah.
As we talk, maybe you'll hear some of the differences that came out for us.
Yeah. Yes. We'll find out. Yeah. So we'll just set it up, I guess. The
Yeah.
Wild Robot. So it starts out with this beautiful nature scene with otters playing in water and
Oh, yeah.
this, beautiful island, lush nature, and something lands on the island that's not from there.
There's a box that's broken open.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is a robot.
Yeah.
Surprise.
And the otters get curious.
Yeah. And so I found out a fun fact that I want to start with just because we're identifying this robot. And in the movie, the robot the name is shortened to Roz, but it's called a Rosm, right? It was a Rosm. And all the robots, because there's others that show up too. They're all called Rosm 7149 or something. I forget the actual number.
Oh, it was 7134.
Okay. So I had a couple of the numbers.
Yeah.
Numbers are not my thing. But I was curious when I was thinking after that we saw the movie, like, where did this word Rosm come from?
Yeah.
And maybe sci-fi people know this, and this is a duh moment, but for me, this was a surprise.
They didn't just
So I
make
looked
up a
it up.
name?
No.
Okay.
So it's from it has a real reason why they used that word.
Oh, I'm curious
So
now.
there was a sci-fi movie in 1920 written by a Czech playwright.
We love Czechs.
Or not movie, a play.
A play.
A Czech playwright.
Okay.
So we've got some Czech involvement here in this movie.
All right.
And so it was a sci-fi movie where there were RURs, which standard for Rossum's Universal Robots. That's
In
the name of the play.
That's the name
Yeah.
of the play. Okay.
And so it was kind of a dystopian movie, surprise, surprise. And what did they say happened? So apparently there was a woman in the play who thought that these robots should be free. They should have souls, or they do have souls, so they should be freed from their, their tasks or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So that's kind of the origins of
Okay.
this
Well, and
movie.
I think you're kind of tickling some brain cells in my head. Was this the play that the word robot came from?
You just read
I
that in my
did. I did. I
notes.
read it in
You
your
are
notes.
totally acting like you just had that
I
thought.
was
I
as I
saw
read
you
this,
reading it.
I'm fascinated
Yeah,
by
so
that.
it's the origination of the word robot
What
from this play in the 1920s.
that is amazing, and we
So
use it every day,
yeah,
but it came from
yeah.
this.
So isn't that a fun fact?
It is. I
Yeah.
also read more of what you wrote.
What did you read?
I
Because I
read
just
that
kind of cut and pasted that.
the meaning in Czech of the word robot,
Oh yeah, that was interesting too. I'm glad you
yeah,
saw that. Means worker.
it means worker,
Yeah,
and that's where Raz or whatever Razum
yeah,
7134 in the movie is
yeah.
the robot, and that is what its identity is at the
Right,
beginning. It comes out of the box saying, "Hello, give me a task."
right. So it means worker.
It
So
means worker,
isn't that
so
interesting?
it's
We didn't
made,
know the word robot came from Czech.
and that it meant worker.
Yeah,
And so that's the central beginning
yeah.
of this movie. That's fast. That changes the whole thing.
Does it? Oh
Yeah.
no.
I'm going to have
Now
to rethink this
your
as we
your
talk.
brain cells are going a different
Yeah,
direction.
because that's really, really cool. So there's
Yeah.
this, I guess they call
So
them Easter eggs now, the kids in the
I
movie,
don't
right?
think that's an
That's
Easter
not an
egg.
Easter egg.
No.
It's pretty, and it's a really neat
This was
little
just an origin
thing.
thing that I found out. It wasn't planted
Okay, but
for
I'm
you.
sure that the producers of this film, that was a,
Well, they wanted us to know that.
yeah, they wanted us to know
Um,
that.
yeah, so the major themes in this movie,
Yep.
and Annika, when she told us to watch it, was kind of like, "Oh, you'll like it. It's nature." But it was so much more than nature. When some of
Yeah.
the stuff started happening, we were looking at each other. We're like, "Oh, this is about other stuff. This is about relationships." And the nature is like a main thing in the
Yeah, it
movie.
is. The nature in the natural world
Yeah,
compared to technology, but also the nature of things.
yeah, yes, because there's multi-layer. So I
Yeah,
would say nature and technology and relationships
those are
are
the
the main things that are happening here. And nature that just is unspoiled, and then what happens when technology is dropped into it, and then
yeah.
the relationship between those two ensues.
Well, and it
Yeah.
made me think of some of the conversations we've been having and thinking about nature. I know I'm not supposed to teach, but I do like to, like you started nerding out. So maybe,
Yeah.
but how we don't appreciate nature as much as we used to. And thinking about some, like when we were traveling in Greece and seeing the Minoan culture, how they built their houses based in connection with nature so that the flow of air
Hmm.
and it was working with
The natural
nature
world.
and the natural
Yeah.
world. And the beginning of this movie is kind of that, of how do we find ourselves in nature and be curious and learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what they show you about nature before this robot enters into this world is that they don't flinch from showing you the brutality of nature. Like,
I was
so
shocked
I
by
know,
that.
right? Because in a nature movie, usually an animated movie,
Yeah.
it's you expect children are watching and all the animals are nice to each other. In this, it is idyllic, it's gorgeous, and the animals are cute, but then they eat each other
Yeah, it starts
and
out
chase each other.
straight kind of Bambi trauma
Yeah,
right at the beginning.
right.
Like one of the birds gets like poof
Yeah, well, there's a lot of
parts.
animals that don't make it.
Yeah, no.
Because
And
I mean, and it's an interesting, I was thinking about that 'cause at first I was like, oh, like, I don't know what age child I'd have watching this. It could be scary
I
because
know.
you think the animal's cute and then it gets eaten.
Yeah.
But they're being honest about the true reality of nature. This is why
Yeah.
I hate to watch National Geographic shows
Oh, I
because it's
know.
so fun and it's so beautiful until
And you
the
see all those
lion
little
chases down the
babies.
baby
Oh
impala
yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then there's a reality
the
that
reality.
with life there is death. I mean, I believe there was a Disney movie that talked about the circle of life.
Yes, there was. Yeah,
So
well, and who said we wrote down some funny quotes. One of the fox in the movie said, "Humor is based on misfortune." Like they're laughing when bad things happen. Like
yeah,
that's kind of true.
and then bad things happen,
Yeah.
and it was. But I think that's true. Like we comfort ourselves dealing with the reality that's out there by humor. I know I do. That's a great
Yes, you do.
defense.
Especially
Um,
dark humor.
yeah, to navigate the
Yeah.
hard things. It's if you don't laugh at it, you're gonna cry. And I'd rather have laughter than tears.
Yeah, or sometimes both.
Yeah,
Sometimes both at the same time.
but that the fox, which his name is
Think.
Fink the fox, is full of self-interest.
Yes.
I mean, it starts out with Fink being an adversary.
Yes. So in this world that starts out, we're kind of getting a view into this world. There's beauty, and then there's a lot of just the natural world, kind of the harshness of it
Yeah,
is happening.
and there's accidental problems.
Accidental
Yeah,
problems.
the robot falls on the nest.
Oh, is that how?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
that's
robot
how that.
killed that egg's
That's
whole
how it
family.
arrived.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it fell.
I kind of missed that. That's how
He
they
fell
perished
into the nest, and then he
and
sees
killed a whole
feathers,
family
and
of geese.
he tried putting all the eggs back together.
Oh, I thought he was just playing a puzzle game.
No, there's also dissociation that happens
There's
in
a
terms
lot
of.
of denial for Tara.
I guess this is also about pain.
Maybe, and our responses to it.
Yeah.
Mm,
So
yeah,
there was
everything's fine.
yeah.
He's just playing games.
Oh, look at how cute they are. But there's the natural world that bad things happen.
Hmm.
And then there's accidents where
Yeah,
things happen that aren't necessarily part of the natural world, but are problematic. And that's the start of the tension in the movie
yeah,
because he finds this egg, this goose egg.
yeah. So the robot drops into this world and survives his fall from wherever, or her, or it, or
Yeah.
it's genderless. That's
But it's
fine.
talked to his mom. So
Yeah.
we'll say
Oh,
her.
yeah. That becomes a mother.
Yeah.
That's that's a huge
Oh, man.
huge spoiler right there.
All right.
Yeah, so so it enters this world and it comes alive,
Yep.
and its first words are what it's to say about its task. It needs a Razum always completes its
Yeah.
task.
Roscoe
What is
knows.
my task?
What is
Or
my task?
what is my task? It's looking for a task. Who ordered me? What is my task?
Mm-hmm.
And that also this is all about the technology, but it also feels kind of human.
Yeah.
Like that we always need to know, what do I need to do next? What's
Well,
my job?
we joke around the difference between human doing and human being, and we like to do, and
Yeah.
that's what's happening here. And the the robot, can't find anyone to give
Yeah, the
it
animals
a
are
task.
freaked out by this thing that's entered their
And they're
world.
chittering, chittering, chittering. And so Roz sits down and decides to slow down
Yeah.
and take in information.
So I liked that moment because the robot's first wandering around this island trying to communicate with all the living creatures and asking for a job or how it can be helpful. And they don't want to be around it at all. And it can't understand their language because
Mhm.
they're speaking animal noises. And so the robot sits down and says, "Activate learning mode." And
Yeah,
I liked that
I
because it just
know.
sat down and time went by and you could see seasons go by, I think. I don't know
Yeah.
how long it was supposed to happen, but the robot just sat there like just kind of curled down, not in an
Hmm.
active mode, and processed,
Yeah.
but quietly. And I feel like that's always what I want to do every winter. Just
Just quietly
sit
sit.
with a cup of tea and let the seasons go by, and I'll come back out when there's leaves on the tree. But I thought it was interesting because by the time the robot kind of absorbed all that was going on, it had gathered a lot of information
Yeah.
about the world and the seasons, and now it could understand all the animal language.
It did make me think about last week's podcast in terms of cross-cultural living.
Yeah.
Of sometimes we go out and do things and we don't know, and we can
And just
trample.
blustering through
Yeah.
and making mistakes.
And slowing down and
Yeah.
observing, because it was
Yeah.
passive learning, but Roz was still engaged in the community,
Mm-hmm.
living in the forest and letting the information come to it to navigate, and then
And not being a
bing,
threat to
right.
the animals.
And then
Yeah.
language acquisition came.
Yeah. I wish it was that easy.
I know. I was thinking as you were sitting there, I
Yeah.
looked sideways and I'm like, that's your superpower.
I know. I wish I could just sit there and listen. I mean, that is how a lot of people learn. If I sat still long enough and immersed myself
Yeah.
in a language, I suppose I could learn it. But yeah, that was cool how the robot first listened and absorbed and stayed quiet to gain information, then to be able to find out what the task was. I thought that
Yeah.
was a good kind of learning thing for us. Sometimes we're just running full force forward and without knowing what our task is, or really, understanding everything that's going on around us, and sitting down and
Yeah.
listening
Yeah.
is a
That's
good way to
right.
start.
It's good for acquisition of language, but it's also good for relationships.
Yeah.
Can I sit and listen rather
Mm-hmm.
than trying to do something?
Yeah.
Might lead to better relationships.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
have this going on. So now there's communication with the natural world, and we get introduced to all the characters that
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be seeing in the next hour and 40 minutes. And the characters are really characters. I laughed a ton. I thought they were well developed. My favorite was the beaver.
Yeah.
Because we're meeting all these different characters, and the Roz is trying to take care of this egg. Well, maybe before
Yeah.
the
So
beaver
explain that maybe. So Roz had, when it fell onto this island, destroyed a goose nest, but there was one egg
that
that
survived.
survived, that was intact. And so Roz is curious. This little robot X-ray vision into it,
Yep,
sees that there's a creature in
a
there,
life,
and
and kind of is exploring it. And as they're taking in information, it starts to hatch, and Roz freaks out because just like broke all the shells. So all Roz's fingers are trying to keep the egg from opening up,
yeah, yeah,
and yet it hatches. And what we know about little hatchlings is they encode,
they
they
imprint.
imprint on the first thing they see.
Yeah.
And so this little gosling,
Yes.
becomes attached to Roz and follows Roz around.
Yeah, and Roz doesn't want that.
No.
Roz is not interested, trying to get away.
And in this whole process, there's Fink the fox.
Yes, and the possum.
And the
so
possum.
They run into the possum family.
Well, Fink is trying to eat the
egg
right. And eat the bird, and
yes, that's right.
There's a whole dynamic that goes on, a chase scene, basically, animated chase scene, and that's how they become friends, of realizing they need to work together rather than try to eat the little gosling.
Yeah. Well, I think Roz realizes there's a task to protect this thing now.
Yeah,
from
its task.
From the fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, it realizes that this is a task that it doesn't really want.
Yeah.
And then the possum comes in, and she's a mother possum with all these babies.
Yeah, about 400.
No.
So gross. No, there were 7.
There were 7.
All over her
body.
Right. and the first thing we see is they're shocked by the robot, and so they go and play dead. And they have dramatic death scenes.
Yes. And it turns out the mother possum kind of is speaking for all parents and saying, you know what? It's your job now. You got to take care of this kid. I know you didn't want to. And this is where I think the robot says something like, I'm not programmed for this. And she says, yeah, none of us are.
No.
And that made me chuckle too, because I think a lot of times parenting in movies is portrayed as like this dreamy thing, and we're all programmed for parenthood. Like it's hardwired into us to be parents. And it doesn't feel that way for a lot of people.
Mm-mm.
It's no matter how you come into parenthood, sometimes it doesn't feel natural. Doesn't feel like you know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
And,
or you should be allowed to take the baby from the hospital.
Right. Like, you're letting me take this home by myself. And so Roz says, well, this isn't in my programming. And the possum's like, yeah, join the club, but you gotta, what did she say? Something like, we just make it up as we go along. And I was like, that's kind of what we say. Like
Yeah.
when people who are in a younger stage of parenting say, maybe I'll learn how to do this as I get farther along. And I'm like, we have kids in our 20s and we're still figuring it out.
Well, and I wrote down a bunch of things, not the quotes, but just my thoughts about this, and it was kind of the same. We need from the possum, we need patience, we need kind of endurance to play the long game, and how do we tolerate the heartache of love and loss was a big part of it because the cost of
I'm just laughing because the possum didn't seem like she had much heartache when one of the one of her babies died. I mean, I'm saying in this movie, like
yeah,
it was pretty raw
she's
with
like,
because
well,
one of the babies got taken by a hawk or something, and she's
yeah.
like, "Oh, now I got six."
But then
So
it
that
came
was a
back.
little
Yeah,
rough. But she took her job seriously. She ended up being a nice kind of maternal figure for the robot, sort
yeah,
of a
but
mentor.
she saw some stuff, man.
Yeah.
She was like a war survivor
Yeah, because she
because
had, I think in the course of the movie, we saw her have like three
other
different litters
litters,
of
yeah,
possum babies.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And the possums were really kind of brutally honest. My favorite one was they're kind of quoting about death. I don't remember where I put that down, but
Oh,
um,
yeah, I wrote it down. One of the possum babies says, "Death's proximity makes life's flame burn brighter."
they're little fortune
There,
cookies.
yeah, because of the whole possum playing dead thing, it was kind of a running theme with the baby possums having these, the playing dead was more dramatic. They'd make up different reasons that causes of death.
Yeah,
It was funny.
yeah. Some of them were really kind of scary ways of dying.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, but it
ooh,
was a game for them.
yeah, it was game for them.
Yeah, so now we're kind of like the meat of this movie now is that okay, now Roz the robot has to protect this baby goose, has to raise it. And so
Hmm.
she's asking like what does a goose do? What do I have to do to get this thing independent? Because now this is my task and I'm committed to it. And she is programmed for that to complete a task.
That's right.
So the parenting wasn't in the plan,
It wasn't in her
wasn't
programming.
in her programming, but now that this is the given task, she's got to see it through,
Do it, learn it.
which kind of sometimes sounds familiar for a
Yeah.
lot of things. So she finds out the bird's got to eat, it's got to swim, and then it's got to fly.
Yep.
And when you can do those three things, it's independent and
That's
you're
the end of the
done.
task.
Hmm.
Yeah. And we joke that successful parenting is helping them reach 18, leaving home,
I didn't know this.
and
This is
we
our
and we still like each other.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
considered a success.
yeah,
That I mean, we still like each other,
yeah,
but and they're still around,
yeah.
but they haven't left
I,
home.
I wouldn't say that's my definition of success.
I was. If they reached 18, they left home and we liked each other. That was
Oh, that
success.
was one way to one plan.
Well, with all of this going on, kind of wrapping up the nature part,
Hmm.
um, that is all juxtapositioned against this rando that they run into, the beaver, and he's played by an actor that we like in the IT crowd, the British
I don't
TV
even
show,
know who played it. Who is it?
the boss of the IT
Oh,
crowd.
okay, I couldn't have
Um,
placed that.
yeah, so I did, but I liked him because he's a little
Irreverent.
irreverent, and you don't understand him at all because he is. They say, "Here's the beaver." He is crazy. He's just trying to take down the largest tree in the forest, and he's been working at it season by season. He's only like maybe halfway through,
Yeah.
and there's this kind of sense of futility in trying to fell the largest tree. And his comment is, you know what? It's not the result. The process is the art, which I just loved.
The process of just chewing this
The
large tree for your entire life.
it's not about the end result. The art
Yeah.
of what we do is the process. And it's kind of speaking to what Roz is going to go through, that
Hmm.
the art of parenting is
Yeah.
the process, but it's this completely random thing that later in the movie
Yeah. Has a
becomes
big impact.
important.
Yeah.
So, nature, idyllic and
And
brutal.
brutal. And then technology, which in contrast was task oriented,
Yeah.
and unfeeling. But I would say you could make a case for nature being unfeeling too, in the way they portrayed it. It
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah,
right,
definitely.
didn't have a heart, it was just doing its thing. Like everybody's trying to survive.
Yeah.
And so um, that was kind of the nature and technology were sort of not, we weren't shown any feelings or heart until Roz, is got this task to care for this goose, but seems to start to get attached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do we know the goose's name at this point?
Uh, I think the robot gave him a name
Yeah. Do you remember
because
what
he
it
said it
was?
had, I think he named it first, he gave it a number,
Yeah.
and one of the other animals said, you can't name it a number.
Names
It has
aren't
to have
numbers.
names aren't numbers. And so he named him Bright Bill because
Yep.
his little goose bill was
Yeah.
shiny, I guess. Yeah.
So,
So Bright Bill is the goose. He is learning from the robot. The goose was also a runt. They called him the runt.
yeah.
So he's never going to grow to typical goose size.
No, and there is a flock of goose. Is it flock of geese?
I think so.
But there's a
Yeah.
group of geese
Yeah.
that say, yeah, runt little dudes like you usually don't survive.
Yeah. Well, he
So,
wasn't meant to survive. Like it was said several times that if the goose had hatched,
yeah.
like just in his
And
family,
nature took its course.
nature ran its course. He wouldn't have made it this far.
No.
So they're both unlikely. They're both trying to survive in a
Out of
world where
out of
they're out
place.
of place.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
do also see the techno world, and it's
Mm-hmm.
this idyllic. People don't have to work. The robots are the workers
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and do everything for them.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of idyllic idea of technology in one environment and idyllic and brutal idea of nature. And in Roz and Brightbill, we have the two coming in places that they shouldn't be or don't have a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And mayhem ensues.
Yes, but we've got a clear-cut task of finding what the bird needs to eat. The fox, by the way, we mentioned the fox who, his character was that he's all out for what he can get for himself, which is often how foxes are portrayed, I think, like kind
Yeah.
of wily and getting what they need. But he
Hmm.
becomes kind of part of this little family,
Yeah.
and wants to be part of what's going on and ends up helping teach Roz what a goose might eat, and
Yep.
I think led him to where the geese were swimming so he could learn how to swim.
But all of that was self oriented
Yeah.
because Fink was getting the food as he was encouraging, teaching how to
Yeah.
eat. And so everything he did was out of self interest early on,
Yeah.
even though he was part.
Yeah. So each of them kind of were getting what they needed for themselves for
Yeah.
survival at this point. And then what do you think? When did it shift to
Uh,
there being an attachment?
well, I think the attachment happened early on for the Gosling because it was its nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think the task became the attachment for Roz.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I don't know when it shifted for Fink.
Yeah.
How about you? So I don't know.
No, but I mean,
It
I
was a
know he was
slow.
definitely attached by the end of the movie. There was a scene, and I'm forgetting the order now. If I'm gonna jump the gun with this,
Yeah, no one knows
when
yet.
the snow came, was that after
The snow
where they
came
had?
after they were
Yeah.
separated.
So, yeah, I don't know when it happened, but the robot built a shelter, so the goose, the fox, and the robot. This all sounds kind of crazy.
Well, it started the
I
building the
live.
shelter was early though
Yeah.
because Bright Bill was little helping it that
Right.
because that stuck out to me
I know it
because
did. Yeah, it was a
mowing
cute
the
scene.
lawn
Right.
it
So
made me
the
think
the
of mowing the
robot
lawn.
which has all the skills to do things fast, is he learned from a beaver nest kind of how to build wood things together in a good structural way, right?
Yeah,
And so he copied that, and he was building a big enough of shelter for them to live in. And the goose wanted to help. The goose was like a child and wanted to be helpful, but it's like a fraction of the size of the robot.
Yeah.
So it kept wanting to help and tapping on the robot's leg with a little stick to try to help lay them in this structure. And the robot kept saying no. And then finally, like, he was persistent, so he'd hold the goose up. The goose would put its tiny little stick
Yeah.
on the wall and put him down. And so it takes twice as long,
Yeah.
which any parent understands.
Well, and Roz put its head on the building, kind of like, oh my gosh, I have to wait for another little twig. This is going to take forever.
Yeah.
But it's about teaching and mentoring.
Mhm.
Sometimes the process is more important than
The
getting it done
outcome.
on time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was the beginning of some kind of attachment, because if he was just about the task, he'd say absolutely, he'd just keep doing it himself,
Yeah, that's
or
true.
Roz would.
Yeah.
I go back and forth on my pronouns
Yeah,
with Roz.
that's fine.
It's fine. So he understood that the goose needed to be involved in the
Yep.
process, even though
And
it took longer.
and that's another form of learning. So there was this passive learning that
Mhm.
happened early on, and then now technology is active learning through modeling. And so you see this kind of development, both technology, nature, that they're mutually influencing each
Yeah.
other, from passive to active to then I would say intentional later on.
Yeah.
But we're in this active learning phase.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the biggest shift in the movie comes when, so this has all happened. Um, the robot is teaching the goose to do goose things, and the eating comes along fine.
Yep.
The swimming is a struggle, but it learns to satisfactorily swim.
But almost dies.
Yeah. It's really not built well for that. And it hadn't learned to do things early enough because it was following a robot around.
Yeah.
But the big thing is to learn to fly, because the geese need to migrate. They need to fly somewhere else for the winter.
And there's
And
a deadline.
so if the goose can't fly by that date, it's not going to go with the migration. It's not going to survive the winter. So
Mhm.
there is a deadline, and that's an important task. But a robot and a fox can't really teach a goose how to fly.
No.
And the other geese weren't interested because this goose didn't fit in.
Right.
So somehow Roz had a relationship with, was that an eagle?
Yeah, no, I thought it
Was it an
was
eagle or a falcon or something?
this might be where I fell asleep.
No, this is a fine time.
I know. I think I might have dozed off a little bit because my notebook had just like a line down it for a little bit. So let's just say an eagle.
So I think it was an eagle.
Okay.
Some kind of impressive bird that has great flying skills.
Yeah.
Volunteered to help the goose learn to fly.
Yeah, totally missed all of that.
Did you really?
Yes.
So it must have been surprising to you that this goose became such a great flyer.
Yeah, and I also don't understand the runway, that brick thing that was built that
Mhm.
the spaceship came down to. Like, when did that get built?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
But
So we saw part of the movie.
so I think I didn't miss much.
So the eagle
So
teaches.
the eagle teaches the goose to fly, and I don't really know what his motivation was, except he felt kind of sorry for the kid because he was kind of left out, and he said, "You have the potential to do this, and you have to do it, and you're going to follow me, and you're going to learn how to fly in a different way than your goose brothers and sisters do, but you have to not follow them, do your thing."
Okay.
And so he teaches them how to kind of roll and weave, and yeah. So somehow he gets his little wings that are too short.
Oh, that makes more sense now. And then when the big flying event happens,
Yes.
the migration,
Yeah.
that he goes, fly your own way.
Yes.
I'm like, what's that about?
Yeah, because he learned a different way than
Yeah.
the geese. He had some different skills. So yeah, so that they accomplished that. And then
Yeah.
this is kind of the big tension in the movie, is that now he's kind of checked the boxes for these tasks to become independent. And Roz should feel really accomplished and really done and happy
Yeah.
that her task is complete, but she's feeling really conflicted
She's having feelings.
about, she's having feelings which are not in her programming.
Yeah.
about letting the goose fly off. And this is what got me too, because it was a lot about launching,
Yeah, it was a
like
lot about
literally
launching.
launching
Yeah.
something that you've raised. And so that really kind of hit the spot for where we are in parenting.
Hmm.
Um, because she said something about, they said, you need to let him be independent. Somebody said that to Roz. And she said, well, I prefer him to be independent close to home.
Yeah, I love that. I love that
Yeah.
quote. Yeah,
Yeah. Because it's kind of how a lot of parents feel. Um, but that's not really, they need to have some separation, which is interesting for us to say.
that's right.
We got a lot in the nest right now.
But it was, I mean, that was I think that was another transformative time. You saw the adolescent part where Bright Bill pushed away, kind of
Hmm.
realizing, oh, when someone told him your robot killed your family.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big moment too. So the identity thing,
Yeah,
when he tried to join the other geese and they're like, you were raised by this robot and don't you know the robot killed your family and you're hanging out with that thing.
yeah.
And so yeah, that was a big rift.
Yeah, and you could see it shifted from a task to kind of relational identity that Roz identified as the parent, as the mom, and really kind of chooses it and loves. But love is, I think, here more than a feeling; it's an action. So
Mhm.
this idea of feeling and action aren't
Mhm.
separate, and it's why maybe technology can feel because it was doing choosing to do things that may be different from its programming,
Yeah.
and that was love.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I also I also appreciated because I think this is true that a lot of times we think lessons only go one way, and especially parent-child lessons that we're teaching our kids things. But this movie really highlighted in the process, they were both learning and having their identity developed in relationship with each other.
Mhm.
That Roz learned as much about itself and the world and purpose as Bright Bill did.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like, oh yeah, I think that's true, but we don't necessarily think about that as parents. We think about what we
I
are
think about
doing.
that all the time.
That how your kids have shaped you?
Yeah.
Oh, really? This was new for me.
Really?
No, not really.
No.
But it was a powerful idea
It
because
is. Yeah.
it mapped onto what we
Yeah,
believe.
because we do see Roz learning and growing much more than anything else
Yeah.
because they are in an environment completely separate from what they were designed for.
Hmm.
So it's like, how am I going to find a purpose now here? Who am I here? And they find a purpose and
They
they
really
find,
do.
yeah, and they find an action that leads to them actually wanting to, well, really changing their whole identity
Yeah.
and their whole purpose. Which yeah, totally maps on
Yeah.
to parenthood
Well,
or really any committed relationship.
yeah, I think for us, in this season where we are, it really is powerful for me of like having a grandchild
Mm-hmm.
and realizing, oh, my kids' lives and development and becoming parents really have affected my identity. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
have a new name,
Mm-hmm.
um, but more than that, really kind of become aware of the more than just my kids, but the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
So praying for Florence, thinking about just the legacy of like we're old and
Thank
uh,
you for that.
we've seen some stuff like the
Okay.
possum. I think we're like the
Oh
possum,
no.
but it's also opportunity to share those stories and share stories here. But there's a responsibility in that identity to more than just you, me, and the kids, but
Mm-hmm.
the grandkids and larger community.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the things when I
Sounds
woke
like you've
up.
been doing some deep pondering.
I have been doing deep pondering. I also thought more about relationships because of what happened at the end. I did I hate this about myself.
You did not cry.
I got a little
Did
teary.
you
I
really?
did. And it was the bear. It was just the tender, like the thing that is most destructive, the apex predator, sets aside that agenda for the good of the community. And
Yeah.
seeing how Bright Bill and Roz's relationship affected Fink and Fink's involvement, which
Mm-hmm.
is the fox, and then Fink being involved in its community
Mm-hmm.
and rescuing people because of Roz's influence in Fink's life,
Mm-hmm.
that you see this ripple effect
Mm-hmm.
of more than parent-child love, but the love shown to each
It spreads
other.
out to the community.
It does.
Yeah.
And then the community gives back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I, I got a little misty. It was quite beautiful to see. And again, tragedy happens, but they all come together and work together.
Yeah. So are you talking about when the huge snow came right after? So
Yeah, that's when
the
Fink
goose
rescued them.
actually successfully launched, flew off with the flock of geese to migrate,
Hmm.
and then right after he left, a huge snow came in that was like a huge change, and apparently they were all gonna not make it
Yeah,
through this snowstorm. They were all covered in ice, and the robot decides it's going to go out and collect all the animals and
yeah.
bring them to this huge shelter with fire burning, and the fox helps. And but then he's gathered all these animals inside this shelter, which used to be predators and prey.
Yeah,
So
they're
chaos
tearing
ensues,
each
but
other
they have to
apart.
decide, we're going to put all this aside to survive.
Yeah,
Is that the part you're talking about?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And then they say we're all here, we're all going to be fine, and the robot looks around and he says somebody's missing, and it was the
mhm,
bear,
yeah,
which
and
had been viciously chasing the robot through most of the movie up until now.
yeah,
Like
damaging it.
damaging, just kind of knocking it off its feet, and
Yeah,
so now the robot decides to go and which I thought was kind of funny because it pulls the rock, the bear is deep in this cave. I
yeah.
get too realistic. I'm like, the
Oh,
bear is
Tara.
fine. It's in a cave. Leave it alone. It's hibernating. but but
It would
they
have
it
frozen
would
to
have frozen
death.
to death. So the
You
robot,
know, you live in the Midwest. No matter how deep you get under
yeah.
those covers, you could freeze to
So
death.
they all become friends, but this also concerned me because now the ecosystem is disrupted. You're getting misty, and I'm like, but they're not going to survive because they don't want to eat each other.
Oh my goodness. Sometimes you have to let go of the
I know
reality.
it's really hard.
The ecosystem did change,
It did
right? But
change.
it changed into a kumbaya, everybody loving each other. So what that they don't have food anymore and that the whole thing will crash down in a horrible,
Oh no.
horrible apocalyptic mess. That didn't happen.
No,
But
it didn't happen.
it shows, I think, the thing that got me touched was Roz's compassion and Fink's compassion end up coming back, and it did change the ecosystem. You could see how the characters on the island all shifted. Of there was still competition; they were going to still eat each other later on, uh, but they came together
Yeah, they did
as
say we'll
well.
set this aside for now.
Yeah,
So there
and
was an agreement
and
that
they
we're
did.
gonna, yeah.
But it makes me think about families, because I think when we think about parenting, when we think about family life, especially in the US, we get very centered on just who lives in the house. Mom, two parents or one parent and kids, and that's the family, and we kind of get isolated. And family life isn't isolation. You could see here the diverse relationships having some permeable
Hmm.
boundary into the community led to flourishing and survival. And
Hmm.
I think that's another lesson that I would want to take away from this movie is, yes, family time is really important, but how do we invite others into that, or how are we participating out of that
Hmm.
to continue to foster kind of vibrant relationships? And the thing I love about what we get to do life together is like on holidays. Sometimes our students in our program don't have a place to go. You do a second Thanksgiving
Hmm.
to involve people.
Well, we
Uh,
invite them to our Thanksgiving, but there's been times I've done a second full meal because our kids couldn't be here for the day, so they come later in the weekend and we just cook a meal all over again.
yeah,
But yeah, I'd love to have people from all over around our table.
and it enriches our kids' lives, and it enriches our lives, and hopefully people feel loved by us. But it's that idea of we have to get out of our comfort zone. The Roz went out into the snow. The bear decided not to eat everybody in the cottage. All of those things are choices for something bigger
Yeah.
than maybe what our biological pull is towards.
Yeah.
And your dad was good at that too, kind of moving out of um, the manual or the
Yeah.
programming, family of
Yeah.
origin.
Looking outside for different ways of doing things.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing too, we talked about the launching and how hard that was for the robot, aka the mother, to let her son fly away without necessarily knowing if he had the skills to survive.
yeah,
But that's not the end of the story.
no,
The good thing is they survive the snowstorm, they survive the winter, spring comes, and the geese return after their migration. They migrate back to the island, and she's running to the edge of the cliff looking to see if her bright bill is one of them. And he
yep,
comes back, he's safe. And at the same time, the robots are coming to recover
yep,
Roz because now she's very interesting to them because she's the first robot that's gone off program and they want to study kind of how she got so
yeah,
different.
yep,
And she could just be done with all of it,
hmm,
but she really feels more at home here now
yeah,
with her community on the island, which is, you know, fascinating.
yeah,
I mean, because I think we're talking about these as if they're sort of like human like relationships, but it also, I think, probably has something to say about the relationship between technology
yeah,
and nature,
yep,
you know, because the technology has learned about nature, it's adapted.
mhm,
And we see that a lot now with AI technology, learning and listening,
yeah.
and adapting to what we're asking for.
I know when we talk
I
about
don't think it
something, we
loves
get
us.
then interesting ads on Facebook or,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. So I think that there's some message about that too,
yeah,
about technology, about nature embracing technology
hmm,
and about technology kind of adapting with the natural world.
yeah. I think that adaptation, trying to fit together
Mm-hmm.
versus against,
Right.
because I think we're still in a technology kind of fear against and haven't learned
Well,
how
we
to work
fully
with.
live with it, but I think there's also some fear of technology and where it might go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a couple of last quotes that I really liked about relationship is one of them was, "What happened was not your fault, but what you did was to try to fix everything."
No, no, no. Okay. Let's
Did I say
let's
that wrong?
a little bit.
Okay, help
Okay.
me out.
So this is in relation to the robot killing the goose's family.
Oh, that's right.
And so
Because this is right
the
after
goose
that part.
says, what happened was not, what did the goose say? I forget who said this.
Yes,
What
the
happened was not your fault,
Bright Bill said that.
but what you did to try to fix it is everything. I
Yeah,
knew you'd love that quote because it's about the repair. It's
yeah.
like you made a mistake,
You,
bad things happened, really bad things happened,
yeah.
but you worked so hard to repair it and fix it. That made all the difference.
And for me, that's hope, right? It's
Right.
hope in relationships, in our marriage of like, you know, what I did, that's my fault. But hopefully we can repair and become stronger.
Yeah. The effort to repair it can make a lot of
Yeah.
difference and can make us stronger.
Yeah. And we just talked about that, right? If it's not the rupture, that's the problem. It's the lack of repair. And if we
Mm-hmm.
repair, something new can come out of that. And it's hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Any last thoughts on the movie? That's all. That's kind of all I
Yeah,
got.
no, I mean, the last thing was just with any animated movie lately, it really is a delight to just see the animation, the scenery, the natural scenery, the fun, cute animals.
Yeah.
Like it's really lovely
Yeah.
to watch.
And it gives you plenty of things to talk about. So we've had
And
fun talking about it.
I think it's great for a family. I think I think some small children could be scared by some of
Yeah.
the animal scenes.
Yeah.
But they all come around in the end. They're friendly.
Yeah. And I think everybody makes it. Oh, that's not true.
No, it's not true.
Well, we won't spoil that for you, but we enjoyed this movie,
Yeah.
and it gave us a lot to think about in terms of nature and how we interact with nature, and just recent research of getting out and taking a walk is good for our health, getting regulated by connecting with nature.
Yeah.
There's lots of science to support what this is saying. Technology, I'm not a fan, but it seems to have some redeeming
in some ways,
qualities.
Imagine life without it.
It would be great. We'd have. Can I use those plastic sheets overheads
That's
to
still
teach?
technology.
Oh, okay. Well, then I need technology to do my job.
Yeah. So we hope you'll watch the movie. If not, just enjoy us just kind of gabbing about something random.
Yeah, and you get to see how we see things slightly. We see the same movie slightly differently, and occasionally I fall asleep in the middle.
I was gonna say, some people come to discuss a movie that they fell asleep in the middle of.
I don't think I realized it until when you said, what kind of bird was that? I'm like, they're all geese. All right, well.
You'll have to go back and watch it a second time.
All right, let's go do that.